And we'll get started. So, hello, this is the Fulmer Street Traffic Calming Meeting number 2. On behalf of the City of Ann Arbor, I would like to thank you all for joining us in this opportunity to engage with community members. These traffic calming projects, they rely on resident feedback, and we appreciate and encourage participation. So, like I said, if you didn't get a chance to complete the demographic poll, I'll relaunch it at the end of the meeting. So it's been a few months since our first meeting. We may have some new attendees. I'll just go through introductions. The Fulmer Street Traffic Calming Project Team is a partnership between the City of Ann Arbor and Wade Trim. Wade Trim is an engineering firm based here in Southeast Michigan. We've been contracted by the city to assist with their traffic calming projects. This includes design work, project management, hosting these public meetings, and sending out communications to the public. So from Wade Trim, you have myself, Christy Thullen. I'm joined tonight by Lori Pollock. She'll help answer some of any questions that pop up or moderate the chat. And we also have Chris Wall, who's on our team. And supporting Wade Trim are Ann Arbor engineering staff members. We've got Andrea Wright and Luke Liu, who's the engineer who's helping us make sure the designs fit with city standards and their history with engineering projects within the city. So this is our meeting agenda for tonight. Most of tonight's time will be dedicated to that section of the traffic calming process where we'll review and discuss all of the devices. And then at the end of the meeting, I'll make sure to give you what dates to look out for next as we start to wrap up the project. And just to have a little refresher, if you're the next couple slides are just a technology overview. If you're joining from a computer or using the Zoom app, there are 2 ways of asking questions and providing feedback. You can press the raise hand button at the bottom of your screen. This will notify the host. You can also lower your hand with the same button. When recognized to speak, the host will allow you to unmute. If you'd rather type a question or comment out, you can press the Q&A button that's right next to the raise hand. A chat box is going to pop up. You can type in the text box and press send to submit your message. Just make sure if you'd like to send your feedback anonymously, you can check this little box here in the corner. And I don't see anyone who's joined here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So far, I've got 6 attendees in this meeting. So for anyone who dials in by phone, you can request to speak by dialing *9. The way we recognize you to speak is addressing you by the last 3 digits of your phone number, and then we'll unmute you. You won't be able to use the Q&A function, but you can raise your hand to speak, and we'll take care of the muting and unmuting. Additionally, there will be a couple points throughout the presentation where community feedback will be requested through Zoom's polling feature. So again, if you're on a computer or using the Zoom app on your phone and a poll is launched, it'll just automatically pop up. After you answer the polling question, just press submit. When the poll closes, the results will pop up automatically for you, and press close to stop viewing them, or I'll close them out after everyone's had a moment to take a look. Again, if you're dialing in by phone, I'll read the question out loud for you, and to participate in the poll, you'll have to raise your hand by pressing *9. I'll unmute you, and then you'll be able to speak your answer or answer the poll. Just as an FYI, that is not anonymous, so it's not just us hearing your response. It'll be everyone in the meeting hearing your response. So just FYI on that. So as a test, we'll launch the first poll question. Just to note, the Fulmer Street project area, it's the properties highlighted in purple. This includes all addresses adjacent to the area of interest, which is the dotted black line, including any addresses within 100 feet from where the project street intersects a local cross street. So we've got some at the end here by Foss Court that's within 100 feet of the intersection. And then the properties highlighted in yellow are part of the informational area. So these addresses were notified of the ongoing project and they receive communication, but they do not participate in polling or in the questionnaires. So if you're unsure of which category you fall in, I've got a little map here, so hopefully you can locate which zone you'd be in. But I've got everyone's answers, so it looks like everyone attending tonight is within the project area, so that's great. And moving forward. One last thing before we start. During the presentation, especially during any feedback from fellow community members, please just keep these Zoom norms in mind. Start on time, end on time. I want to be respectful of everyone's time. I know it's in the middle of the week, it's in the evening. So I want to try and get everyone out of here as promptly as possible. Raise your hand to be recognized to talk. There will just be one speaker at a time. If you are speaking, please move to a quiet area, silence any background noise when speaking. Make sure you're speaking loud and clear so we can all hear you. Everyone will be provided a chance to speak before we start calling repeat speakers. Please be respectful of other ideas and perspectives. We really want to avoid finger pointing. We want to try and differentiate between fact and opinion. And lastly, any inappropriate written and or verbal comment or language, including personal attacks and accusations, will result in the attendee being removed for the meeting. So 0 tolerance on that. I don't think we'll have an issue. But if there's anything that I've missed, I'll pause here, raise your hand, use the Q&A, and we can just get some of this introductory stuff out of the way before we jump into the good stuff. I'm not seeing anything, so I'll move on. Okay, so what you're seeing is the preliminary plan that was mailed to project area addresses and marked in the street for the self-guided tour. So if I know the weather's been kind of iffy, but if you've had a chance on your commute or driving by or walking around, you'll see we've set up the self-guided tour kind of around. I know there's construction going on, but we've set up signs just to show where these devices, how they would look in real life in the street. Before we get into discussing this, I just want to pause and mention recent developments that have occurred since we did the setup, since we mailed out those packages. Separate from this project is a ramp request that was placed with the Ann Arbor Sidewalks program. So this ramp request is at the path leading to Hatcher and Crescent neighborhoods over here, right across from 1727 Fulmer Street. I just want to stress that this request is outside the traffic calming program and is totally separate from this project. Whatever the outcome is with this project, that ramp request will still stand. That being said, we wanted to do our best to coordinate efforts between the two programs. And I know at the last meeting, we avoided putting any devices near that path. But after internal discussion, the sidewalks program has given us the okay to basically consider the ramps and connections in our traffic calming design. So we can design as if we know they'll already be there, even though they're not installed yet. The final scheduling and budgeting, all of that is still in the works separate from this project, but in terms of traffic calming and the ideas that we're coming up with, we can now plan around the assumption that the sidewalk ramps will be installed at this location sometime in the future. All of this happened after we set up the self-guided tour and set out the mailers. So I still want to share and discuss the plan that you're seeing on the screen, but I also want to share the updated or alternate preliminary plan that we put together since we've had those internal discussions with the sidewalks program. So it's not, there's not a great difference, but I've just changed the slides. So here's, just as a preview, this is the alternate plan that we came up with. We'll zoom in on the differences between this and the plan that was mailed out and set up in the street later in this presentation. Both are posted to the project website. And I also sent a copy of this alternate plan by email to those who had provided their email address for notifications. As a side note, if you haven't gotten any emails from me and you would like to get them, you can enter your email in the Q&A or just send me an email and let me know you would like those notifications. Most of the time, they're just notices that a mailing is going out, but with this last minute change, that was something that I had sent out by email. Again, we'll zoom in on each of the devices, but before we do, we'll just go through a couple slides and make sure everyone gets a refresher on the types of devices that we're proposing and just some general information on them. So this slide shows curb extensions, which are examples of devices you drive around. Curb extensions can be used in several designs, curb bump outs, mid-block bump outs, and chokers. Shown on the right, the photo of the street view there is a curb bump out at Granger Avenue and White Street, so not too far from here. Or actually, no, sorry, is kind of far from here, but still in Ann Arbor. So curb extensions, they act as an extension of the curb line to both physically and visually tighten the corridor by narrowing the street width. You can do two parallel curb bump outs that can be used to create just a width, a single lane width passageway or a choke point. You can alternate the bump outs and create a chicane effect. Just some things to consider with curb extensions is they may require drainage consideration. They may require loss of on-street parking. They may cause debris to collect around the device. And if they are installed, we have to maintain 20 feet for emergency response vehicles. In regard, later, I'll show you in the plan, but we're actually proposing a curb extension at a mid-block location. So devices applied at a mid-block location, they can shorten pedestrian crossing distance and improve pedestrian visibility. Also eliminate illegal parking, but I know there is legal parking allowed in the street on Fulmer, so it actually removes some of the on-street parking. Not much though. The other device, one of the other devices that you'll see in the plan are speed humps. So there's just a typical speed hump diagram on the left. On the right is an example from Wells Street. Speed humps, they're typically 12 feet long. We keep them at a maximum of 3 inches high. This has been shown to be safe for both vehicles and bicyclists. I know there's concern with vehicles bottoming out as they're driving over speed humps, but we do keep them at the same height as like a raised crosswalk or a speed table, just for that safety element of having bikes being able to travel over. They extend for the full width of the street except for the gutter. In general, speed humps have been found to lead to speed reduction, traffic volume reduction, crash reduction. On-street parking is permitted if it previously was allowed on the street. Vehicles can park on speed humps, and also trash cans can be placed on speed humps if necessary. And the other type of device that you'll see in our plan is a raised crosswalk. So typical diagram on the left, an example on Forest Avenue on the right. Raised crosswalks, like the other raised devices, they're at a maximum 3 inches high. The center platform is flat with those crosswalk markings, and then tapered on both sides. They extend the full width of the street, except for the gutter. Typically 18 feet, 18 feet from taper to taper. Their studies have shown that raised crosswalk treatments can lead to speed reduction and traffic volume reduction, as well as crash reduction. We like them because they increase pedestrian visibility. Some things to keep in mind when they're being installed is that the installation has to be compliant with the American Disabilities Act. And then parking on a crosswalk is illegal, raised or not, so it's not adding or taking away any on-street parking. I'll pause here. Yeah.
Yeah, there is one question about how do bump outs and other traffic calming measures impact snow removal? And I have the answer to that from the guidebook. The street would continue to receive winter maintenance at the current rate. The City of Ann Arbor street maintenance staff handles snow plowing in areas throughout the city where traffic calming devices have been installed, and the location of devices that you drive over are clearly marked by reflective posts so the snow plows are aware of them. Hopefully that answers the question.
Thank you, Lori.
Yep.
Yeah, I know the inspector, one of the inspectors with the city has mentioned before that that the communication has to go back and forth, so maintenance is aware of new devices that are installed and what to avoid.
Mm-hmm.
If there are any other questions about the devices, I just kind of threw at you. If you have any just general questions about how these devices work, or want me to go back to anything, I'll pause for another moment. You can use the Q&A, you can raise your hand. And I'm not seeing anything else, so keep moving forward.
Are the speed humps susceptible to potholes at the transition? Seen other neighborhoods with large, deep potholes at the interface of roads and bumps. So I don't believe we've seen that issue with the speed bumps that have been installed in the past. They are monitored. And if there's any issues, you can let us know.
Yes, Ann Arbor does have an app. I think it's called Click It to Fix It. I hope. Ann Arbor does have an app where you could submit any maintenance. Thank you. A2 Fix It. You can use that to submit any maintenance requests, but also I know that in certain cases, if the extent of the taper leads into like the street, which actually I have an example for it later in the presentation, which is why we made an adjustment. If the edge of the concrete leads out in a funny place in the middle of the street, it can be subject to damage a lot earlier, or wear and tear a lot faster than than typical, but I don't believe there's any significant correlation with the installation of speed humps and potholes. So this slide here is device number 1. It's the way I'll do this is I'll show all the devices that was on the plan that's marked in the street and that was mailed out. If there was a change based on the conversation we had with the sidewalks program, I'll show the original plan first, and then I'll show the alternate version of that device number. So device number 1 is the same and did not change since our conversation with the sidewalks program. Device number 1 is a mid-block bump out near 1872 and 1856 Fulmer Street. This was not part of our starter idea, but during meeting 1, there was a desire expressed to have additional devices or devices that extended into the park area. A curb extension was chosen. This could easily be a speed hump, but mainly what we wanted to do is extend the number of devices through here. I know sometimes there's a concern with, once you get over a speed hump, people immediately, slow down for the speed hump, but then immediately speed up right afterwards. So we just added another device here just to catch people who might be tempted to speed up after the next device or from turning off of Foss Street and seeing a straightaway and then speeding up there. If there are any questions about this device, I'll pause this device specifically. I know I had some feedback sent to me by an attendee or by a resident who couldn't attend the meeting tonight. Basically, the question was, are six devices considered a lot for this length of street? So I just wanted to add that the spacing between the devices is the bigger factor rather than the number of devices. So like I said, we added this device based on the feedback from our last meeting. And in general, when we present the starter idea, we don't present it with the maximum number of devices that are allowed in a project area, or necessarily that there is one best solution from an engineering standpoint. It's what we present is just a high level best fit based on the data that we have so far. So, everything is reviewed from an engineering perspective, but this project is largely led by your feedback as residents. So when we show you something, if you want something more, if you want to see something different, our response is to make it work for you, also giving you the context of things that you might want to consider, or letting you know if it's not feasible based on how things are laid out. So if there are any questions on this device, otherwise I'll launch another poll question just to see how we feel about this one. So I've just launched it. It's just, do you support that mid-block curb extension? There's a lot of options here. I know everyone's in the project area, so go ahead and take a moment. I'll even go back to the image if you have any questions or anything else that you wanted me to clarify. And I've got a hand raised. Go ahead, Charlie, you can unmute and speak.
I wasn't sure from the picture, is this a double extension on each side of the street or just one side of the street?
Just one side, just on the side with the park.
Okay, that's what I
So
thought.
on this, yeah, just on the side where street parking is permitted. So it would remove a little bit of the on-street parking, really maybe only one less space for a vehicle.
Okay, that's what I thought, but I wasn't positive.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I try to capture in the photo just so you kind of see where the device is relative to the street, but then like the device sometimes is just so small that it's hard to get all the detail.
Oh, I see it now that you're saying that. Okay, thanks.
You're welcome. So I've got all the results. Everyone's voted. If there's any kind of like anonymous feedback that we want to add, any context, go ahead. All right, we'll move on to device number 2. Oops. So device number 2, this is unchanged from what we initially presented. It's a raised crosswalk. There is, it's over by the sign for Garden Homes Park. There's already ramps and sidewalk connections there, but you know, raising the crosswalk will just help improve visibility. You'll get those pavement markings in there, and it'll just be another device for vehicles to drive over. And when we use them in a series, help create a traffic calming or slowing down throughout the entire stretch. I'm trying to recall if there were any questions that came up at the first meeting here, but if there's any comment or feedback or question that you have on this device, I'll pause for a moment. And then I'll just go ahead and launch the poll regarding this device, raised crosswalk. See how we feel about supporting this one. And I've got a question here about, can we do another poll for the first device as a speed hump instead of a bump out, which totally can do. I've got, oops. Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. I ended the poll before. Sorry, I didn't get all the responses. If I just relaunched device number 2 polling, if you could get your responses in there. I prematurely ended it and didn't get all the votes. And while you do that, I'll create an alternate poll. And then I've got another question that the existing curb cuts at this crosswalk are older, and would they need to work ahead of this crosswalk installation? They can put in the raised crosswalk portion without touching the ramps, without touching the curb. They could do it independent of those repairs. I don't believe specific to this program they would take care of it. But it would be definitely something that would be, given a heads up to the proper group that would manage that. And I mean, likely it might even be the same crew who does the repair, but that work would not need to be done in order to do a raised crosswalk here. So it looks like we're in full support of device number 2. Bear with me and I will add. Okay, so going back to device number 1, I've just launched another poll. Instead of a curb extension, would you support a speed hump? All right, I've got everyone's responses. Looks like we're a little mixed on that. If there's any context or any additional feedback anyone wants to chime in with, you can use the Q&A, you can raise your hand. Otherwise, I will move forward. So we just did device 2. So device number 3, originally, before we had the conversation with the sidewalk program, was a speed hump. And even prior to that, at the first meeting, we had a speed hump, but it was farther down the street. We had moved it here because it was brought to our attention that where we had initially placed it, it was known that the resident that was living at that location really didn't want to see any kind of devices, so we moved it. This is now near 1706 Fulmer. So it's just on the other side of that path that we're anticipating a sidewalk ramp installation. So because we've had that discussion with the sidewalk program that said, go ahead and, consider those ramps being installed, not right now, but they will in the future, go ahead and consider it in your design. So prior to this meeting, we just came up with an alternate. So the device number 3 alternate, instead of that speed hump I just had on the screen, is a raised crosswalk at the path. And I can answer this question that has just popped up. Device number 1, I thought, was going to be a raised crosswalk at the existing crosswalk. It is. Device number 1, we just added another device, Ruth. So there was a desire to see more devices in front of the park area. So device number 1 is a bump out, but we still have that raised crosswalk at the existing one that we're proposing. It's just, I didn't want to confuse anyone by numbering things out of order, but also the numbers don't totally match what with the original plan. Are there any questions about the two choices for device number 3? So this is the device number 3 speed hump outside of 1706 Fulmer is what is marked in the street and what was in the mailer that we had sent out a couple weeks ago. I will launch poll questions, separate poll questions for device 3 speed hump and the device 3 alternate raised crosswalk at the path. So hypothetically, if we put in a speed hump here, there would still be sidewalk ramps and sidewalk connections and a crosswalk installed here at the path. It just would not be raised. It would just be a plain crosswalk. So part of our coordinating with the sidewalks program is, if you're going to put a crosswalk here, traffic calming might as well take advantage of that and make it a raised device. So that way, not only is it a device that you would drive over to slow down traffic, but it would also increase pedestrian visibility.
Christy, there's a question from Ruth. I think I'm confused which side of the street we're starting on here.
Oh, sorry, Ruth. I can.
And then how do you raise your hand? But
Ruth, you can, if you want to speak, I should have just sent you a notification that lets you unmute yourself if you'd like, but I'll show you. So this is the plan that was mailed out to everyone and that we set up.
I'm
Hi,
sorry.
Ruth.
I think I figured it out. I got my iPad out and I'm looking at the map you sent. So I was
Okay,
confused with device 1. I thought that was the
Yes.
south side of the street. We
Oh.
haven't gotten there yet. So never mind
Oh,
about my question about the
oh
raised.
gosh, did I change the numbering on there?
No, I don't
sorry.
think you did.
Okay.
I don't think you did. I came in a little bit late and I have 2 kids that are a little crazy and I didn't have another device to look at the actual map that you sent.
Okay,
So I'm
okay.
on the same page as you. But I think right now what you're talking about is the device number 3, which is the crosswalk that would be built. That's not
Yes.
currently there.
Yes,
Whether or
so
not that should be a raised crosswalk.
correct. So
Okay.
what we mailed out to everyone was this plan that we had finalized before we had the conversation with the sidewalks program. So, after we had already staked everything and marked it, we got that okay. We had that conversation with them and they had said, just, go ahead and treat it as if it's, going to be installed and you can plan around it. But I didn't want to, throw everyone out and throw away the plan that we had mailed out to everyone. So I'm presenting it as like an alternate. So we can go ahead and consider a new sidewalk ramp and a crosswalk being placed here near the path. But without traffic calming doing anything, it'll just be a regular crosswalk. So basically, when you're looking at device 3 here with this speed hump, it would be voting. I'm gauging for support on this speed hump, knowing that you'll have a crosswalk here. But our alternate design is instead of the speed hump, we'll just do a raised crosswalk since we already know the ramps will be installed. So I'll do, Ruth, was there anything you wanted to add?
No.
Okay. So I'll launch the poll. I'll launch 2 polls. One for device number 3, the speed hump. And then the other one for the alternate, the raised crosswalk here. And just for the sake of, if you prefer one over the other, please vote yes on the one you would like to see and no on the one that you would rather not see. If you don't care, you can vote yes or no for both. But just, so this poll that I'm launching right now is, do you support device number 3, this speed hump? Knowing that we'll have a crosswalk here in the future, but it'll just be a regular crosswalk. Would you support having a speed hump here? Okay, so we're getting a fat no here on the speed hump. And so I'm hoping that means we would prefer to see the other one. So I'll launch. So I'll launch our alternate poll, knowing we're going to have a crosswalk installed here. Would you rather see us change the design to a raised crosswalk? And yeah, it looks like we're all on board. So great. And I know this was a really important crossing and a really important area for everyone at the first meeting. So I'm really happy that we got this coordination timed correctly. So like I had said before, the ramp request is entirely separate from this program and this project. Whether or not in the end we do a raised crosswalk or any of the other devices, that sidewalk ramp will still be in the works. So I just want to make sure that that we know that you'll get that crosswalk regardless of the outcome of this effort. And then moving on. So now we're just on the north side. If you're looking just at it from on the photo, we're on the left side or the north side of Garden Homes Drive. So we're proposing a speed hump here. Initially, we had proposed a raised intersection. It's either a raised intersection or a residential traffic circle at the Garden Homes Drive intersection, and no one was really a fan of that. So instead, we've placed a speed hump on just after and just before the intersection, just so we have some uniformity between devices to keep the traffic calming effect and like the series of traffic calming devices throughout the street. We've got a fire hydrant that's over here. The reason why it's not any farther is just there's a number of driveways. There are some structures like the manhole covers that you see here, these circles that we want to avoid, and we need to have clearance from the fire hydrant. So this is kind of like the best fit for where we could place it. It's near 1610 Fulmer. If there are any questions or comments, any additional comment that someone might want to make with this device, I'll take a breath for a moment before I launch the poll.
I have some comments.
Yeah, go ahead, Ruth.
I don't know if other folks went around driving to see what it's like to drive over some of these things. The speed humps are pretty okay. My husband thinks they're pretty good. So that's great. We both really think the raised crosswalks are awesome. And I remember the last meeting, a traffic ring was proposed, which nobody liked. But I don't remember a raised intersection being proposed. And I sort of feel like that would be kind of cool because then you'd have both those crosswalks raised up a little bit. I guess it probably wouldn't slow traffic as much as a speed hump, but I feel like if we're having, let's see, how many is it that are being proposed? 1, 2, 3, I don't know, 5 to 6 devices. That's a lot to get through to get down our street. So I don't know how aggressive they need to be if we have that many of them. That's just my take on it.
Thank you,
I
Ruth.
like the raised crosswalks the very best out of all of them.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm trying to remember. I thought we had floated the idea of a raised intersection, and I thought there had been pushback on anything at all in there, but maybe I'm misremembering.
I could be as well.
um, there are, so the number of devices, it's not really like, is it too many or too few? It's more of, are they spaced properly? So we had added that bump out towards Foss because some of the feedback had been, we want to see something, in the park area that extends into the park area after that raised crosswalk that's there.
Yeah, yes, I'm sorry to interrupt again, but I think I voted the wrong way on device 1 when you did the poll because I was confused. I would have voted okay for the speed hump.
Okay. So let me go back to the aerial view of everything. So this is the alternate plan. So this is where we're at right now, device number 4 and device number 5. So we had placed the additional, the device on either side of the intersection. So we have spacing between. So, if we had the device just in the intersection, you have someone coming along and they have to slow down through the intersection. And then, they're seeing the straightaway, they might be tempted to pick up speed again. So, originally we had another a speed hump somewhere around here, I think. So removing something from this intersection, if we had only put, one speed hump or one device on this side, and we don't have another one until this raised crosswalk here, you have this entire stretch of street that's just a straightaway. And these devices are best utilized in a series, and when they're spaced kind of as uniformly as possible. We are kind of, we do kind of have a gap in here just because of, I think this was not an ideal location based on some of the resident feedback. We've got the hydrants that we need to maintain clearance from, and there's just a number of driveways that are kind of staggered that limits where we can place devices. So if, sorry, I'm seeing there's additional questions coming in. So that's why we added 2 more in place of this. But what I'm hearing is you would rather see a raised device just in the intersection, not a traffic circle, but
That's what
raising.
that's what I personally am saying, but it's obviously it's what everybody, can come to an agreement on. And I completely understand why you would put, a speed hump on either side of the crosswalk. It makes perfect sense. And everything that you're saying and why that you guys chose what you chose and where to put it, it makes sense. But I'm just bringing it up because the first meeting, I don't remember raised intersection being on the table, and maybe it was and it got voted down, and I just don't remember that. but I remember traffic ring being offered.
Mhm, mhm.
I think a raised intersection is great. I think the raised flat crossings are the least obtrusive for the residents who live on our street, and there are more than one that don't want any of this.
Mhm.
And also, I really love how the crosswalk not only provides some bit of altitude that a car has to go over, but there are those painted lines that go across the middle of the street, which provide a visual for cars to have to, drivers to have to sort of automatically, oh, there's something in the middle of the road, I better
Mm.
slow down, just because it's a
Mhm.
visual that's there. So that's all I'm saying. Maybe it's too late to go back and reconsider that, but and if so, the speed humps are where they're placed are a good compromise, I would say. But anyways, you can move on unless somebody
Oh,
else has something to say.
I do have a
Great.
couple.
Yeah, sorry, I was gonna let you know there was a few questions from Rob.
Oh, thank you.
If Garden Homes did have a crosswalk, does that mean an additional device between Garden Homes and device 3? So I think if we did have a change like that, we would have to reevaluate the spacing in between the proposed devices so that they meet the guidelines of spacing about 350 feet if possible.
Yeah, and already between between this new crosswalk, the one at the multi-use path, and um device the speed hump here, or even between Garden Home drives. Sorry, let me move this presentation forward a couple slides. So between this device and the crosswalk here, we're getting close to our limit of where we of how far we want to space devices before we consider putting another one in. So we would want to put in another device if we did something at Garden Homes and device 3. Again, the ideal location I believe was in front of someone's house who did not want anything there, or who was not in support of traffic calming in general. So it's just, trying to be mindful of that. I know majority would probably rule in this case, but we did want to try to be respectful of that as much as possible. The only thing I can think of now looking back at, and I apologize, this image is awfully blurry, but at Garden Homes and Fulmer, where just on this side, there are actually a number of structures and hydrant. There's a fire hydrant, and actually, like right here, there's a fire hydrant at the intersection. And it's not that it would be impossible, but it would involve an extra additional work of adjusting the structures, of extending the raised sections so that the fire department has their, I think 40, they wanted 40 feet of flat surface, or 20 feet of flat surface. Regardless, they wanted at least 20 feet of flat surface. They don't want they don't want to have to risk parking any of their emergency vehicles on the taper. So basically, normally the raised intersection would just be, limits of the crosswalks. But at this section, we'd have to extend it quite a bit farther down. Not that this is anything that residents need to concern themselves with, but the raised intersection does have a very high cost associated with it. Ultimately, we have to propose this to City Council. So I'm starting to think, other than, I thought I remembered someone being a non-support of anything at the intersection, that might have been the only other reason why we didn't move forward with it. And then I know, Rob, you're commenting that the area is the crest of a hill somewhat. I'm not sure folks increase speed as much in that gap. That could very well be true. It's only that when we see a gap large enough, you know, right now we're at 590 feet-ish. Anything much greater than, you know, 600 feet or so is when we start to worry that the devices might not be, the devices that are there won't be doing their job well enough if we have too big of a gap. And then I've got another comment, if we can vote on device 4 being a crosswalk at the intersection instead of a speed hump. Yeah, give me just a moment and I will create that poll question for you, and let me launch the original poll question and just, do we support device number 4 being a speed hump here near this 1610 Fulmer? While you vote, I will create another poll question of raising a crosswalk. Okay, I've launched an alternate poll of, do you support device number 4 being a raised crosswalk? Keeping in mind that we would likely want to place another device in between the raised crosswalk at Hatcher, at the new crosswalk location. But it's definitely something that we can revisit and see if it looks like, I guess, just taking another look at how big that distance is and seeing if it could still make a huge difference if someone were to try to speed up before they hit the next device. Okay, so I have support for this, not 100%, but I do have support for this. So between now and launching and sharing the final design, we'll take another look at that one, at changing device 4, and then seeing if it's something that we can present as a final design. So I'll move on. Oh, did I just add the same photo? I'm sorry, bear with me here. So device number 5 is also a speed hump, but it is a speed hump on the other side of Garden Homes Drive. And if I just take a moment, I will update it for you. Because that is the wrong picture. So here, let's do this instead. This is device 4, this is device 5. So as I was saying, as I had said earlier, instead of putting a device at the intersection, we are proposing something before and after. And then Ruth, I see your question, wondering why the 2 speed humps on either side of the intersection couldn't be curb extensions. It sounds like you're saying at the locations they are, instead of a speed hump being a curb extension.
I think that, so the question is 2 speed humps like parallel to the curb? Or maybe Ruth, do you have
Um,
a little bit better description?
yeah, like instead of those 2 speed humps, curb extensions. Like what you guys proposed for device 1.
I think the road width is open enough, would be open enough to put a curb extension on one side. We wouldn't be able to do anything on 2 sides just because the road isn't super wide here, and we have to maintain 20 feet of clearance.
Right. No, well, the device 1, the curb extension's only on one side of the street.
Yes,
So
that's correct.
That's what I was assuming they would be like there as well if you were to do curb extensions instead of humps.
Honestly,
Mm.
we had leaned towards speed humps because a lot of the initial feedback, like when we had sent out the initial questionnaire to residents, had been, most of the responses had been in support of speed humps, and having positive experience with them, and how there used to be speed humps on Fulmer, and some people had expressed that they wouldn't mind seeing them again. So I just gravitated towards speed humps in general. I know when we did, I don't know if you were here I don't know if you were in the meeting yet, but when I presented the curb extension towards Foss Street or Foss Court, we ended up doing an alternate polling question of, would you rather see a speed hump there instead of the curb extension?
And I think I'm personally indifferent. I'm just really concerned about being mindful of the people who don't want a whole bunch of bumps. And with all of the raised crosswalks, particularly because one hopefully will be in addition to what's already there. I don't want to alienate my neighbors because I've initiated this thing that puts a bunch of bumps that they have to drive over, and they're pissed off at me all the time. Every time they go over a bump. Anyway, I'm kind of fine with the speed humps, I guess, because all of the devices need to be, as you said, spaced out properly so that it slows down the traffic that goes down our street. I saw somebody zoom down today at wildly fast speeds. So it's definitely necessary. And I have driven over the speed humps. And for anybody who's on the meeting, who lives on our street, and you haven't been over a speed hump that were in the device suggestions, like the examples they have posted out on our street. I literally drove over them yesterday and they are not horrible. So if we get speed humps, it's not going to be the end of the world, and it'll slow down the traffic and keep our kids safe. I was just posing the question because it seemed strange that there would be just one suggested curb extension. We could have curb extensions instead of speed humps. I don't know. I'm blathering now. I'm sorry. I'll stop.
And someone had a comment, all options seem better than speed humps. I think that and Christy, I'm not sure if you're speaking or if we lost you. But we can't hear you at the moment.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, sorry.
Okay.
So I know that when we were coming up with the starter idea, all the devices that are in the traffic calming guidebook under the device toolbox section, we weren't able to use the pedestrian median or the pedestrian gateway treatment or the island or the chicane, or not the chicane, the choker curb extensions because of the width of the street. We had, after meeting one, we took the residential traffic circle out of the picture. And I'll have to look again at, from what I recall, the raised intersection had to be taken off the table because of all the structures that are at the intersection. So we had structures here that if we start a taper to over by here, it just wouldn't work with the structures that are out there. And then also with the fire hydrant to give the proper level area for the emergency vehicles, the raised intersection would have to like be extended pretty far down at this leg of the street. We'll have to take a look again at whether or not it's possible to put in raised crosswalks on either side here. I know we have some valves that we would need to check with the inspector on whether or not they could be worked around. But yes, I'm happy that that there's a lot of feedback on looking at other alternatives. I just also want to say that this is our last public meeting that we'll have for this. So I want to make sure that if there's feedback, that we get it all now and that we try to workshop some of this, because I don't want I wouldn't want anyone to get the final poll and not be happy with it, or not feel comfortable with supporting it. And then I see, Carrie, you have your hand raised. If you want, you can go ahead and unmute. Whoop.
Hi there. I just wanted to say thank you to Ruth again for bringing this project to light and getting it started. And also personally, I would not have any problem with speed humps. I think that they're the way that they're laid out right now is, to me, seems most effective to slow people down. I do think that having curb extensions as a proposed alternate in some of these places, especially device number 4, I believe there's like a lot of on-street parking in this particular location. And when people park on the street on both sides already, it's just very narrow to begin with. So I think a hump is what we really need. And I would not ever be upset with anybody for proposing this. I think that these are all good options. And I think that if you look at these devices and you're really opposed to them, then say so. And those people who are opposed to it have the right to speak up. But I do like the fact that we are being heard here. I'm hoping that we can come to a consensus, because this was my understanding that this is our last meeting. So I think proposing too many options at this point is detrimental to getting this project started. So I just want to say I'm in support of that. I hope people are being honest and voting the way that they feel. And I just wanted to thank Ruth once again. And thank you for your time.
Thank you, Carrie. Yeah, I don't want to wipe the slate clean and start proposing things that we haven't considered before. With this intersection, I know we had looked at having a treatment at the intersection. After this meeting, I will get in touch with the inspector again to see if it was possible within the program to put raised crosswalks. I don't know if we would do raise both crosswalks, but I'd have to check with them. But from what I recall in previous conversation, because of the number of structures and utilities that are there, it was something we were trying to steer away from. But if it's possible, I want to make sure that we understand, and if it's not possible, I want to make sure that everyone understands why we can't install anything there. So that being said, I will launch the poll question for this. I guess if we've already voted, we have already had the alternate poll of a raised crosswalk. If you're absolutely opposed to a speed hump here, just vote accordingly. But if it ends up being that we can put in a raised crosswalk, and you wouldn't mind to see either one, just go ahead and vote accordingly there. And then Carrie, you can unmute again if you'd like. I see you had your hand raised.
I'm sorry, I didn't lower it before.
Oh, okay, sorry. Okay, so I have my results for device 5. Like I said, I'll make sure we get a solid answer on whether or not a raised crosswalk is possible there. And after this meeting, what we do is post a discussion summary. So
that'll be one of the items that's listed in the summary. I think I might have already shared these results. So I'll end and we'll move forward. And then the last thing is originally we had proposed a raised crosswalk here. We marked it in the street and then realized, and I know there was a question or a comment that kind of alluded to this earlier about potholes forming at the edges of speed humps. And so when the inspector was marking this out, they realized that this tapered portion here where you see the chevrons would actually extend almost in the middle of the intersection. So what would happen is you'd have vehicles coming from Fulmer Court, and if they were to turn, I guess either way, there'd be a point that they're hitting in the concrete. These are going to be concrete speed humps or raised devices. There'd be a point that would be just subject to wear and tear a lot easier than just the traffic that's going back and forth over it. So when we were adding in the other crosswalk, the new crosswalk, when we were doing all that, we went back and looked at this. And I know at the first meeting, I mentioned we want to avoid, there's a hydrant at Miller Avenue here as well. And we wanted to make sure that we had the clearance, and, if there is a crosswalk, whether it's in light use, if we're going to have a device, at least we could have it where there would be pedestrians using it. But then looking back at marking it in the field, it was just kind of like, well, it's going to get damaged easily. It would be susceptible to damage easily. And then we just took another look, and it would be possible with the spacing in between to put a speed hump here instead of this raised crosswalk. So this is the alternate design. This is near 1470 Fulmer Street, or 1470. No, that's 1415 and 2135 over here. So towards the end on Miller, we'll capture drivers turning off of Miller, and before they get a chance to pick up speed. I know most of the cut through traffic tends to come from Miller. So really with the raised crosswalk, I want to point out that given the limits of how far this taper would have to go before and after the crosswalk, it would likely get damaged or need repair a lot sooner than any of the other devices. And having this alternate, it is really kind of a better fit for the traffic turning off of Miller. So before I launch the poll, there's a question. Is there a speed limit sign on Fulmer close to cars arriving from Miller, or would more of those be added, or are they just not effective? This program does not include any signs outside of what is required by the traffic calming devices. So we wouldn't be adding any speed limit signs. And I'm not sure if there's any on Fulmer, but let me launch this poll. So this is, do you support device number 6, the raised crosswalk? And like I said, this is the one where with how far out we'd have to create the bump or leading up to the hump, it would extend in the middle of the intersection, and likely be susceptible to damage early on. And I'm trying to look and see if there is a speed limit sign on Google Earth while you guys vote. Because from what I'm seeing in Google Earth, there are not any speed limit signs on Fulmer towards Miller Avenue. But the traffic calming program would not include anything like stop signs or speed limit signs. The only signage that it would include are signs regarding the speed humps ahead, or other required signs for traffic calming devices. And it looks like Ruth has confirmed there are no speed limit signs on the street.
So, Christy,
Yes.
I'm having a little trouble hearing you, but in regard to the speed limit signs in Ann Arbor, they're just generally not posted on the local streets. They rarely affect the 85th percentile speeds and really aren't considered effective speed control device. So they would not be included as part of this program.
Gotcha. Thank you. Are you able to, am I coming in any louder or?
Just a little bit. So I'm sorry if I interrupted you. I just couldn't hear, but
No, I
Just-
don't know what's going on with my microphone today. I apologize. Hopefully it comes out a little louder in the recording, or hopefully you're able to crank up the volume if you're listening from home. If it is coming in a little quiet, I apologize.
yeah. And another thing is, just in regard to the speed limit signs, generally the public, is expected to know the speed limit's 25 through the residential area. So that's another reason why, there isn't one on your street.
Oh, thank you. So this is, those were the results for the raised crosswalk. So what I'll do now is launch the alternate, the redesign that we're proposing. So instead of a raised crosswalk, how do we feel about having a speed hump closer to Miller Ave? And within clearance of all the utilities there. There's 3 hydrants, all within that area, which I think is only like maybe 200 feet. Okay. So I have results. It looks like in general, the majority are not in support of having a speed hump instead of a raised crosswalk here. That being said, this design here, I'm gonna, when I ask the inspector about the Garden Homes intersection, I'm going to ask again about what other things to be aware of with the installation here. And that'll be included in the discussion summary as well. Okay. And then, so right now I have 8 attendees in the meeting, which is, I think we just went from 7 to 8 from the beginning to now. So we're starting to run short on time, and I want to open the floor if there's anything else. But first, so following today's meeting, We will post the presentation and the recording once it's made available to the project website. Usually it's in a week or so. We'll also post a summary of today's polling and use that feedback to finalize the design plan. So the summary, in the discussion summary, we'll make sure to address the idea of raised crosswalks at the Garden Homes intersection. Additional detail on having a raised crosswalk at Fulmer Court. And once the final plan is ready, in between then, feel free to reach out to me. I'll have my contact information on the next slide. Feel free to reach out to me if you have any other questions, but once the final plan is ready, we'll post it to the project website, and we'll also mail that final polling card to all the addresses, and that'll be May 17th. So that'll be in a couple weeks. The deadline to either postmark or fill out online that final poll card is June 5th. After that, we'll tally the results. We'll let you know if we've met the requirement to move the final plan forward. If it moves forward, we'll go to the Transportation Commission meeting. We'll ask for support from them during their June meeting. And then the target city council meeting date will be in July for final approval, where it'll be open to public comment again. And also, if it passes, then they'll set a construction date and all of that other good stuff. And then the requirement to move forward with the final poll. Of the people who participate in the poll, there needs to be more than 50% who support the final plan. And when you vote on the final plan, it's as a whole. So it's all of the devices that you see. Do you support this plan? It has to be more than 50%. So if 4 people participate in this poll, and only 2 people are in support of it, the final plan cannot move forward. It has to be more than 50%. So lastly, this is my contact information. It's the project website. If you have any thoughts, questions, or feedback that pops up after today, or after we publish the final plan, please reach out to me. If you did not get a chance to complete the demographic poll before the meeting, I've just launched it again. So if you could please fill that out. As I said, this is just a standard poll that the city uses so they can make sure that their public engagement efforts are everything that they need to be, or that the residents need them to be. If you have any additional questions or comments, I can stay on the line for another 5 minutes. Otherwise, I just want to thank you. Thank you so much for your time and your participation this evening. And throughout this effort, I've received a lot of feedback from people, and I really appreciate the care and interest in this project. And I hope you have a great rest of your evening.